welcome back to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World Conference 2022, Day 3, our first kickoff of the morning here. We are joined by Abhi Golhar. He is the co-founder of NPHub, podcast host, and Think Reality. And his presentation here this morning is entitled Learning to Play and Win the New Game of Money. Good morning, Abhi. Thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Glenn, thanks so much for having me and the entire One World family. Listen, I mean, for me, one of the biggest challenges in building long-term wealth is understanding this game of money that we have to play. Whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a high-income earner, you're just getting started in your career, you might even be a real estate professional. One of the challenges is understanding what are some of the foundational elements of building wealth and getting rich and staying rich that we need to make sure we understand. And is it following Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey's advice? Probably not. That works if you're 95% of America, but you're here today to learn some additional strategies that you can use to play this new game of money. So that's what the 30 minutes we have for you this morning, playing with the new game of money. Super excited. I want to talk about my experience in inner city Detroit in 2003. I went to the University of Michigan from 2002, graduated in 2006, and that was a very trying time for me. The first semester I was at Michigan, I thought I was really, really smart, but guess what? I ended up being part of the Square Root Club. You know what the Square Root Club is? It's where the square root of your GPA is actually higher than your GPA. So you do the math. When the square root of 4 is 2, and positive integers only, right? The square root of 4 is 2. The way that equation works is if the square root, like the number you're square rooting, is less than 1. So you guessed that my GPA was less than 1 my first semester at Michigan. And that unpacked this entire world of negative emotions for me. I thought, okay, am I going to just become an academic, get a job, and then figure out how to retire one day? How's that going to work? And I started seeking mentors. One of my mentors ended up teaching me exactly what not to do in real estate. And this was roughly around 2002, 2003. I was flipping homes in inner city Detroit. And I thought, well, I want to grow this business somehow. I need to figure out that next step. But before I could do that, my contractor calls me and he says, Abhi, we have a little bit of a problem. So it's roughly 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I'm finishing classes. And he says, hey, you have to go to your flip that we're doing in inner city Detroit and check it out. I've left a shop vac for you in the family room. Now, I didn't really even know what a shop vac was. That's how inexperienced I was with real estate. When I get to inner city Detroit, I'm a little worried. I'm a little cautious. I'm driving my 92 Honda Civic DX and it smells like crap in the inside. And I enter the property and I hear running water as soon as I enter. My heart sinks. My blood pressure rises and I can hear my heartbeat just pounding in my chest. I'm like, okay, it's going to come out of my chest. At this point, I'm getting super worried. So I go downstairs and I'm neck deep in water. And I think to myself, well, okay, now I know what the shop vac's for. I went through the next couple of years as this weird investor, entrepreneur, trying to figure out my life because I was scarred from my challenge and from this experience in inner city Detroit. I ended up wholesaling that house to another investor, but the part of me that didn't want to invest anymore kind of stayed with me for many years after. This presentation is geared to help you understand how you can win the game of money and also believe in yourself. Because for me, I was too busy to get to that point. I was too busy to take a chance again. I was too busy to believe in myself again and build that confidence back up. And many of you might be in this position where you're thinking, well, I've got a spouse, I've got kids, I've got my work, then I have to work out, and then we have to go for a walk, and then there's TV time, and then there's this new episode of Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie. There's this new episode of Star Trek that we also have to watch too, right? Maybe you're too busy. Or maybe if you're a real estate agent, you're thinking, I've got all my clients and I've got to go show properties and do all my paperwork and get closings done. But when do I have time to even invest in real estate? Well, that's not the only problem. The other problem is, you remember in the 90s when Super Nintendo first came out, or even just the original Nintendo gaming system came out and you didn't know how to play it? It's not your fault that you don't know how to play this game of money, especially when you aren't taught to play the game of money or even know that a game of money exists. And you have all these financial advisors telling you that you should do something, that you should buy a mutual fund, that you should buy this and that and the other, which have high loads and high expense loads, which don't help your long-term wealth. So it's not your fault that you don't know any better, just as I didn't know any better in Detroit, Michigan. And that was a major challenge, again, for me in my crusade to help America to get more educated financially. So the two questions that I want to help you guys answer today, number one is how do I build wealth? And the second is how do I accelerate it and preserve it? There are 5 pillars when you're looking at investing in real estate or generally just investing in general. One, you want to make sure you have the mindset to execute. That is a very, very big deal. After I crashed and burned in inner city Detroit, I didn't believe in myself anymore. And I was far from having a mindset that promoted success. The second is financing, getting your ducks in a row, getting your financing in order, whether it's from a community bank, from private investors, angels, VCs, whomever that looks like, and really getting in gear and aligned with your financier is a big deal. Third, you want to build a team. I'm 5'5" and 135 pounds wet. I know what a sledgehammer looks like. I'm not going to pick one up. So guess what? A contractor is going to do that for me. I need to surround myself with people that know what they're doing better than I do. And then it's my job to go out and find the additional opportunities to invest in. Next, due diligence. Doing your homework is important. We live in a world today where interest rates are rising, and it's a good thing they're rising. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you want, but interest rates are rising. Inflation's a thing. How much are you paying at the pump? And then how much are you paying for a gallon of milk? I think at Costco the other day, I paid $3.25 for a gallon of milk, and I had to buy 5 of them. So due diligence, making sure that you do your homework on the deal, on the economy, on the macro and micro economies are super hyper important. So you as an investor, put on your investor hat now. You as an investor are thinking about your money because nobody cares more about your money than you do. Last but not least, deal sourcing. That's at the top. Once you understand all of the others, then you can start finding deals. Then start looking at deals and understanding, where are they coming from? Do I need to talk to wholesalers? Do I need to talk to other brokers? Where's my deal flow coming from? Because now you have your homework, you have the mindset, you have your team built, you know where you're going to get your capital. Now it's time to go get deals. Let's start with deal sourcing. We'll start from the top and go to the bottom here. Deal sourcing in the real estate space specifically, because remember, we're talking about getting rich. How do I build wealth? Real estate for me is one of the best ways to build wealth. You get 5 powers in real estate that you don't get anywhere else. It comes in the form of the word ideal. This was coined by Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he says, ideal stands for income, depreciation, equity, appreciation, and leverage. Income, depreciation, equity, appreciation, and leverage. That's why real estate is a big place where real estate investors, where the ultra rich hold a good amount of their wealth. Where do I source deals? Other wholesalers, my fellow real estate agents and realtors that are out there, my colleagues in the real estate space, private lenders are a very good source. Other real estate influencers that you might find on Instagram that might have a closer access to deals than you do. Construction crews, absentee owners, people that live outside the state but still own property in the state are a really good source for finding opportunities to buy. Affordablehousing.com is a government-run website. It's a government program to help those individuals that cannot afford housing get housing. It's called Section 8, and the owners of Section 8 properties will list their properties on affordablehousing.com. In 2020, we had COVID. There are a lot of folks that did not appreciate the fact that they owned lots of property and they had all these tenant issues. Going to affordablehousing.com gives you exposure, can give you a list of real estate investors that have properties that they may want to sell. Due diligence is up next. When you're doing your homework, there are a couple of things I want you to take a look at. I want you to look at school ratings, I want you to look at crime, and I want you to look at your competition. Now, there are a lot of other things you want to make sure that you pay attention to, like affordability, walkability, your investing personality. You want to do all the math as well. But these 3, your school ratings, specifically your high school rating, your crime, and your competition. Competition is defined as the homes next door. What is their finish level? If you're renting them, if you're going to buy and flip them, where does your flip need to be? If you're not on point right now, especially in today's economy, you are going to get burned. Today, I'm finding a lot of investors, and I have a podcast. I'm the host of the Think Realty podcast, and all I do, sometimes all day, is when we're recording is talk to real estate investors. One of the biggest mistakes real estate investors are making today still is they will make emotional buying decisions when they want to buy and hold for long-term rental, when they're buying properties for that, or number two, if they're buying properties to buy and flip. Do not get emotionally attached to the buying process just because you think you've found a good deal. You don't want to do that. Really understand your competition. And if there's an opportunity to make some money there, great. If there's not, move on. Your team. This is hyper important for me. Super hyper important. This also, guys, applies if you're buying and flipping businesses. This slide does not apply only to real estate. For me, construction crews. I want to make sure my construction crews, if I'm flipping real estate, matters. How much experience do they have? Have they done flips before, or are they only doing residential rental quick turns? There is a big difference between the construction crew for a large build, new construction, versus a quick renovation versus that for a rental property. I want to check out my property manager. If I'm buying and holding for long-term wealth and I want cash flow, I want to make sure my property manager understands that I'm in it to win it and that they are also in it to win it. Property managers with experience, not new property managers here, folks. Your ROI, your money needs to make more money for you than you work for it on an annual basis. The way that equation only happens is if you have the best people on your team. You also want to make sure you have a good asset protection attorney. Far too often, I've seen real estate investors house and hold 30, 40, 50 properties in one LLC. Big mistake. If somebody sues one property, if say a tenant sues you from one of those properties, all of the other properties are exposed. So that's a big deal. You absolutely want to make sure that you are paying attention to your asset protection. Last but not least here, private financing. Private financing is a big deal. If you don't have the right kind of cash, guess what's going to happen? You will not get access to your deal. It's that simple. I live in Atlanta. As an investor, if I'm not ready to buy that house in 10, 14 days, not just due diligence, not just my earnest money period. No, I'm talking the actual from start to finish. Sometimes it's even 5 days. I will line up private financing to make sure this happens. Private financiers look at a couple of things. The most important, credit score, your experience, and the amount of cash that you have on hand. They do care, of course, about your construction crews, your budget, your ARVs, your LTVs, the as-is value of the property, of course, the location of the property. But what do they care most about? What are the first three things? What's your credit score? They want to make sure you're a responsible payer. Two, what's the experience you have in this particular type of real estate, whether it be flipping, new construction, single-family rentals. And then number three, your cash on hand. How much cash do you have? You could be the most experienced. You could have an 800 credit score, but you have zero cash and you want to borrow $1 million. Guess what happens? You're not going to get that deal. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. So that's the way that I look at real estate opportunities. Bar none, if all I do every day is pay attention to those 5 pillars from a real estate acquisition perspective and a business acquisition perspective, you are eliminating the emotional want and the emotional need to get involved in the buying process of the property. Let that be for the homeowners. That's great. But for you as a real estate investor, you've got to be a little bit different because you want your money to be working really hard for you. So once you've gotten rich at this point, you've built your wealth. How do you preserve it? What are some of the things that you can do to see additional tax deferred or tax-free gains? Well, my favorite, all-time favorite, is a self-directed Roth IRA. Now, this is not a TD Ameritrade Vanguard type of account. This is a third-party custodian that you can use to open up what's called a self-directed Roth IRA. It works just like any other Roth IRA. You can only contribute a maximum of $6,000 a year into this self-directed Roth IRA, just like you normally would a regular Roth IRA. The difference, though, ladies and gentlemen, this is like a wealth accelerator for me. The difference is I can direct where I want that capital to go. So normally I have a Vanguard Roth IRA. I can only buy ETFs, exchange traded funds or index funds or stocks and bonds and mutual funds inside of that Vanguard Roth IRA. I don't have a whole lot of power or control over where the capital goes outside of equities. If I want to invest in real estate, if I want to lend somebody my money, how can I do that? Inside of a Roth IRA. And you know, a Roth IRA is a tax-free vehicle. So you're already paying taxes on the $6,000. This is a post-tax investment vehicle. That's very powerful. If you say take 3 years or 4 years and you invest $6,000 a year, and it's going to take some time, nothing happens overnight. I'll give you the secret though of how I use the self-directed Roth IRA in a second. If you take 3 years, $6,000 a year times 3, $18,000. You take $18,000 and lend it to a real estate operator. And on that $18,000, you get 20% every year tax-free. That's the return that you're getting. That gets kicked into your self-directed Roth IRA tax-free. Guys, this is how the ultra wealthy are preserving their wealth right now in America. Self-directed Roth IRAs. There was an article that I read, I think it was in the Economist or the Wall Street Journal, that talked about how Roth IRAs and self-directed Roth IRAs are going to become more under fire by the government, because all the ultra wealthy are hiding their capital here. Not really hiding. They've already paid taxes on it. But if you take $100,000, if you have $100,000 in a Roth IRA and you roll it to a self-directed Roth IRA, guess what happens? It's a like-for-like exchange. You don't have to pay any fees, penalties, or anything. Now you just have to find a home for that $100,000 and you can start winning the game. I've got friends that have accumulated $500,000, $1 million in their self-directed Roths, and they're making 20%, 15% on that capital year over year, and $150,000 to $200,000. Let's say you invest $1 million and you're making 15% on that. That's $150,000 that's being given to you in return. It gets kicked right into your self-directed Roth IRA tax-free. That's a really big deal. And this is like this. I probably should have started with this. This is a massive opportunity for anybody listening that has a little bit of cash in a Roth IRA, and you're like, well, I'm not really trusting the stock market right now. That's a big feeling. Like, I'm looking at my feeling. I'm looking at my trading account on my phone, and it's sunk a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting to break even, because the only way that you're going to lose in the stock market is if you exit at a low price. So I'm going to wait for a little bit. I'm going to break even. Then I'm going to sell my positions, depending on what positions I have. I'll rebalance my portfolio, and I'm going to move more of my assets into a self-directed Roth IRA. This, to me, is the number one strategy you should be thinking about using right now. A SEP IRA, you can do the same thing in a SEP IRA. SEP IRA is a tax-deferred vehicle, meaning you'll pay taxes later down the road. A simplified employee pension plan gives you the opportunity to invest $61,000 every year. And this is for 2022. So they'll probably update the numbers for 2023. But if you have a self-directed SEP IRA, guess what? Yeah, your business is crushing it. Your business, you can invest $61,000 into your SEP IRA. And now you can self-direct that $61,000. And for those of you that are cash heavy in your business and you're looking for a tax-deferred vehicle, this will mitigate and lower your taxes. And generally speaking, you can push this $61,000 into an investment vehicle or a large percentage of it. The same thing you can do in a self-directed solo 401k. This is, if you're a business owner, you can only open this up if you're a business owner with 0 employees. Unfortunately for me, I have multiple businesses with employees underneath each of them. So I don't qualify for this automatically. But If you're a real estate agent, you're a solopreneur, you have an entity, you can set up a solo 401k for yourself because the government understands like, hey, you need a retirement vehicle also. Guess what, guys? You can self-direct that solo 401k. And if your business is doing well, your yearly maximum in a solo 401k is $61,000. You can self-direct that $61,000 and invest it in real estate. I'm not saying you have to go buy property with it or leverage that necessarily. We can have that conversation offline if you'd like, but there are opportunities in the real estate space and the business space to take chunks of equity to get a good return on investment and for you to control that, because nobody, again, I've said it a couple of times, nobody cares more about your money than you do. And if that's the case, don't you think you should have a little more control over where your capital goes and what happens with it? Last but not least, I want to talk about debt. Debt is a good thing. A lot of people, including Dave Ramsey, say, pay off all your debt, pay off your mortgage, pay off this, pay off that. Guys, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, now I do agree that if all you're doing is going to Louis Vuitton and swiping your card every day or every month or every year to buy a purse for $5,000, yeah, that's the kind of credit card debt that will get you into trouble. But if you're swiping a credit card to buy a tax lien, or if you're borrowing money from a bank to go buy a property, that's not bad debt. That is very good debt. You're using money that you're borrowing at, say, 3.25% or 4 or 5 or 6%, even if it's 7%. And on that money, you are investing it into a cash flowing vehicle, like a piece of real estate that is cash flowing with a tenant. That tenant is paying your note, and you get cash flow at the end of the month. So when Robert Kiyosaki talks about this idea of ideal income depreciation, equity appreciation, and leverage for real estate, the leverage part he's talking about is debt. The income part he's talking about is the cash flow. The depreciation part he's talking about is the IRS schedule for 15 or 20 years. That it's a phantom equity line. Essentially, the IRS says your property is valued less today than it is tomorrow from a structural building perspective. So you get an expense line for that. You'll build equity over a period of time. You also appreciate. The home generally appreciates 4 to 8% yearly on average historically in the United States, with the exception of the last couple of years. I think we've seen some pretty large returns, some large appreciation numbers in the double digits in most states and most counties. So nonetheless, using debt is a very good tool, but be cautious, make sure your numbers make sense. And this is where the 5 pillars really helps. If you're ready to use debt, that's a mindset thing. If you have a team around you to help facilitate the completion of a project, you're using debt properly. If you have the right financing, well, hey, that is debt. You're using the right kind of long-term or short-term debt, whether it's equity or actual debt. Then you have your due diligence. You want to do your homework on the deal. Perfect, even better. You're using your debt responsibly. You're being a good shepherd of that debt. And then you're sourcing the deals that make sense for you, your portfolio, and your financial future. So here's the challenge that I have. The challenge is don't have your future self in 25 years or 10 years or 5 years. Look at yourself today and slap yourself across the face because you didn't take advantage of a clear winning opportunity. The challenge is learn the 5 pillars, get to where you need to be from a money perspective, invest for the long term, and make sure that your money is working harder for you than you do for it. And then go teach somebody else to do the same thing. And let's all work together to fix the lack of financial education in this country. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to me. You can find me anywhere on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'd love to continue to have the conversation. Thank you so much.
Abhi, thank you. Great job. I guess the Square Root Club was right next to the drinking club in the student union, I assume, right? or in general proximity anyway.
Yes, that's right.
I was in Detroit late 90s for some stock exchange business, so that I can certainly appreciate your stories from looking at the town back then, and certainly on the property side. Hey, one quick point, and just to kind of covered on the preserved wealth technique here. As you look at that, the Roth IRA, the SEP, and the solo 401k, that's all existing tax legislation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing out of the ordinary there. You're just otherwise executing that which is on the books, right?
Yes, that's correct.
As you go. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure on that side. I think what you said on the due diligence side, when you look at your 5 pillars, and as you said, this would go for any business, irrespective of real estate. I think those are all valuable steps. Due diligence, your team, all of these types of things are incredibly important. But the stuff specific to real estate, like you talked about, whether it's interesting how you view your neighbors, right, as competition. I thought that's an interesting angle when you look at it that way. And certainly people talk about schools and scores and certainly crime stats for sure.
Yes.
For sure. I also thought you had down some mentorship stuff. How is that reflected on some of your career?
Mentorship has been a very, very big deal for me. It's the way that I'm standing on the shoulders of the giants, right? So none of this is all me. I mean, I have my energy, I've got my time invested, but generally speaking, what you're really looking for, whether you're buying a business or buying a piece of real estate, is somebody that can take you under their wing and start to explain how the world works. That really helps. Like the self-directed stuff, I would have never figured that out, ever. Like I would have never figured out how Mitt Romney ended up with $100 million in his Roth IRA. It's because he used a couple of really expensive financial engineers and a self-directed Roth. Like there's no other way he could have done that. And then, of course, most recently, we had Peter Thiel, and there's a lot of legislation around that where the government was looking at it. But like, I still have mentors in my life that point me in these directions. And it has been phenomenal, the learning experience that comes with it. And I love being able to pass that information down as these things change. And as new opportunities open up, like the opportunity zone, that was a very interesting one that President Trump initiated and started to push through. That was interesting. 1031 exchange as well. But there's so many of these opportunities that I enjoy passing down that I believe is just my responsibility because others have done it for me.
Terrific. Well, great points, great insights. Thanks, Abhi, for joining us this morning and kicking off day 3. We wish you lots of success in the future. All right. Thanks for joining Leading Entrepreneurs of the World today.
Thanks, Len.
See you next time. Thanks.